Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 57 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning back into the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 57. Today, we're going to be talking with Tyler Tisue. Tyler's been on the show a couple different times. He's a longtime friend of Todd's and certainly become a friend of mine, and is absolutely a wealth of knowledge, really, with anything whitetail hunting related, and definitely with shed hunting. We intended for this to be the first of several shed shows, but as luck would have it, Bentley Coben happened and a few other things that I explained, or I will explain later in the show. So we only got to do one with Tyler, but we certainly hope you enjoy it. With that, I'll just get right to the show. We hope you have as much fun listening to it as we did recording it, because it was a blast. Here we go. Well, hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Today I have joined with me over in Iowa, actually two guys, one of them being none other than Mr. Pringnitz himself. And then I have Tyler Tisue joined on the other line. Guys, how's it going today?
It's going good. It's going good. I appreciate you having me on again. I thoroughly enjoyed it last time, and it's always fun to talk with you guys and talk deer. So I'm always game.
Well, rock and roll, man. I was just checking my Spartan camera, just seeing if any antlers have fallen, and still most everything is still carrying around me, but it's always a fun time of year. So this is the Shed Show.
The Shed Show.
Well, happy to be a part of it.
So
we got it. Go ahead.
So, although I've only found 2 sheds so far this year, so.
Okay, well, we're not gonna gauge your past performance this year on your future performance, because something tells me you're gonna find more. Both of you guys are pretty experienced in finding sheds. I, however, am not. Let's first talk about, if we could, how you guys go about figuring out where it is that you're gonna start this whole process. Todd?
Well, I think both Tyler and I mean, half the battle is knowing where the deer are going into shed season. And one of the ways that I know myself, Tyler, and pretty much everybody around here uses is corn in front of a camera tells you a lot. And you can actually pull and draw and move deer into position, so to speak. And so where you put your corn piles, I always try to do mine adjacent to bedding area stuff so they don't have to travel far. But, dude, it's so weather dependent. Like I was talking to Tyler about it yesterday. If you have corn out and all of a sudden the temperature swings to 40, 50, 60 degrees, which it has done in the past. Last year was one terrible shed season because it got so mild. The deer just aren't stressed to push them on the food, so they'll just disperse, which means they just spread out. And those are the tough shed seasons, because that just means your antlers are basically spread all over Kingdom Come. But, like, boy, if we have another couple weeks of really cold weather like we've had with the snow on the ground here in Iowa, it's not that common, so it really freaks the deer out, and you literally can move deer a mile. And in my case, I've got deer that come from different sides of properties and here and there, and boy, with the snow on the ground and the cold weather, the cattle trails just come into your farm, and then it can be a killer shed season. But, dude, Tyler will tell you the same thing. It can all change with one weather front, and if it gets real warm and mild, then it just is a tough shed season.
Yeah, and I was telling Todd here yesterday, is that I do something similar where go and dump corn piles here, help the deer get through the winter, and of course it centralizes a lot of sheds sometimes. But so I said I spent hundreds of dollars doing this, and then usually about mid-February, all of a sudden it warms up to 50 degrees. And then here I spent all this money trying to keep them in a centralized location. And then all of a sudden they just disperse, and which rightfully so, because the food completely changed for them. I mean, all of a sudden now they can go back to browsing on, everything that's on the ground there. I mean, it changes up the game and trying to find those sheds a lot more, because, and the reason, a lot of that is, in my opinion, is it's like, well, if the deer are on corn piles, first off, it does add stress. I mean, the deer are basically all trying to, eat off the same one. Well, all of a sudden when it warms up, it's that old buck, just like he always does, going off into his own space where he can, not have any stress there, feed on his own, and be in that protective sanctuary, wherever that might be, in late winter. So that can, obviously, change how you end up going about, some things when it does warm up, is kind of going back to the basics almost of hunting, and where would these deer want to be, in bed, when the weather's good. So, but this year we seem to be pretty blessed that I think if it continues, I think that it will. I mean, we got a little bit of warm up coming up here soon, but if it continues, these sheds are going to be really centralized. And at least, just like Todd tell you, I mean, and when I say centralized, it just means they're going to be in their basic spots. If you're a deer, or even if you're a human, you go walk out in the woods sometimes, and you can feel where those spots, where the wind is hitting you, and typically for a deer, that's those southeast facing slopes, where that northwest wind, that cold northwest wind isn't coming across them. You'll find them typically, that's one of the first spots that I'm going to check, if I had to cherry pick on spots. I'm going to the southeast facing slopes where the sun comes up in the morning, shines on them. It's a very, very, easy spot for a buck when it's cold to go in bed. And that's where, in seasons like this, where I'll find a good majority of those sheds. And then from there, a lot of it is I love those grassy slopes. What you'll typically find a lot of times whenever deer shed, or you're looking for shed antlers, is even if it's just a cornfield, a pit cornfield, and you might not have a corn pile or anything like that, a cut bean field or anything like that. I mean, you have those specifically, a south-facing, grass slope or anything like that around those. I love those edges, because what they typically do is they'll go and bed in that grass in the middle of the night, bed in the grass, get up, go feed, go back, bed in the grass for a little bit until it starts to get close to, morning again, or if the, and then they'll go back and bed in their regular spot at that time. But that's where we find a lot of sheds. It's just in the grass, in those warm season, type grasses, in the Midwest here, that's in the form of brome grass, CRP, sometimes can be in switchgrass, if it's not super, super thick. There's a lot of different, variables, that of course come in. But that's the spots where I'm going to check initially. And a lot of times, to be honest, I mean, they call me lazy or whatever it is, but I'll just hop on a four-wheeler, especially when it comes to checking these fields and grass. Get on a four-wheeler, I can stand up a little bit taller and, look side to side, and I can just cover a lot more ground, when it comes to these field edges. And
dude, in that,
for you guys who are, what's that?
Oh, dude, I'm seconding the grass. That it always seems to be like your drainage strips, especially in farmland. If you've got a farm piece of property, a lot of times they'll leave those. Yep. I forget what they're actually called, but they basically have to control erosion. They've got just strips of basically CRP and grass that come up. And it's the same thing. You go in those areas and there's poop everywhere. You can see where they've been matted down, and those are just money. And it seems like tall grass anywhere, even on field edges, little weird corners, it just isn't a magnet for deer, because I think they actually like to lay down in it, and they can just kind of sit and they can browse a little bit even while they're laying on their bellies. But it's just comfortable. It's kind of like hay. It's like hay for cattle, basically.
Exactly. It's nice, and they don't call it warm season grasses for nothing, right? I mean, they can just lay down in it, comfortably, and it's a nice, nice spot. But another spot that I like that I seem to find quite a few sheds is like the backside of like a pond dam. If you notice, most of the time those things are always hilled up, quite a bit, and the deer can always get out of the wind, right there, especially in winters, like this, and even the more warm winters, I'll still find them, in those spots. But it's not the bottom line is when it comes to finding sheds is you have to put on miles, and whether that's on a four-wheeler, whether that's on your feet, you got to put on a lot of miles. Like, so we all see guys, that seem to go out and find sheds, all the time, a lot. And the reality is they're probably putting on anywhere from 50 to 200 miles on their feet at a certain point throughout the entire season. I mean, that many miles. So I know a lot of guys who pick up a lot of sheds every single year, and that's just like what they enjoy. I mean, they're not always the giant big buck killers, but they love to pick up sheds, and that is their thing. And they, starting from right now, they're starting and walking, public ground or something like that, where they're not worried about going and disturbing. And speaking of walking, even if you guys, for those who are listening that are wanting to go out, right now, and you have your own private ground, you're not necessarily wanting to completely bump them out. One of the things that I've done over the years is, so usually I maybe do a walk like mid-February here coming up. And what I try to do is actually treat them kind of like a deer drive in a way. I mean, I grew up in Iowa where, deer drives were the thing, when I grew up. And so I learned how to, do that. Well, so what I'm going to try to do is actually keep them in the section. So like if the wind's out of the south, typically they're going to want to run into that wind, or if it's out of the north, but I'm going to try to keep them in whatever section it is. So whatever that wind is, you're going to try to drive them and keep them in your section, there. So that way you still have something to go and find, in the beginning of February, or beginning of March or mid-March. So that's a couple of other, little tips there, is treat it like a deer drive almost in a way when you're doing it, because you will go and stir up deer. And if those deer still have, horns in their head, you don't want to completely run them out of the country, onto the neighbors where they go shed over there. You still want to be able to find those sheds. So I wouldn't be looking, I guess I probably would say that maybe every 3 weeks that I'll probably hit the same type of area, once you get to this point here in mid-February where, I'll go maybe the first week, and then maybe I'll try probably 2 weeks after that once you get into later part of March, because most all deer have dropped, for sure by then. We'll typically do I'll bring down a lot of friends and stuff like that, and we'll go. I think it falls on a weekend where it's like the 17th and 18th of March this year. We'll probably pound the place, that year. We'll walk every single thing we possibly can. I don't care what the wind is, whatever it is. We're just going to walk everything, because 95% of the deer have dropped, at that point. And, up until then, sometimes.
That's kind of my rule of thumb too, Tyler, is like, I like to hit everything twice at least. And I kind of like hitting everything. If you can hit it with snow, it's just, to me, it's just unbelievable the amount of information you can learn just on deer traffic. And particularly even after snow, like yesterday, I took a wheeler ride. I honestly just needed to get the heck out of the house. I'm going crazy here. And just driving around, like we had just had a snow come in a few days earlier. So basically it gives you a snapshot of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 days. But the other reason I like it is because some antlers are dark, some antlers are light. So if you have a white backdrop, sometimes it makes antlers actually stick out. And then if you go back in after the snow's melted, you get almost like a second walk, because you're going to find the brighter antlers that maybe have blended in a little bit. But those 2 times I was actually, I just had Facebook feed come up the other day of when I found Walter Payton's shed last year, and it was like March 6th, I think, something along those lines. So March is the time. I think in February we're always so impatient. You end up going out and walking here and there. But this year I'm trying to be a little bit more patient. But I'm telling you, the coolest thing ever is these Spartan cameras during shed season. I've never had them running during this time of year. Usually I'm just running my regular cameras. And to be able to actually watch them as they come in real time, not having to go out there and check your cameras and blow anything out. It's been the greatest tool now, because you just don't feel pressured to go look, because they're still on their heads. So that's been one of my favorite parts of this season so far, has just been watching my Spartans.
And I've been able to do the same thing here, this year, and it's been cool. I mean, I literally watched one buck, he had both horns, and then 2 hours later, he shed one side, and then like 5 days later, he ended up shedding the other side. It was actually quite a while. I was surprised by how long he was holding on to it. But getting that real time, interaction there is just second to none. The other thing that I would encourage, and this is another one where I'd maybe even throw a lot of stuff, out the window, where is if we'd end up having like a rain, here in late February or early March, for sure, I'm gonna do everything I can to be out there, because whenever you get those rains, those horns they shine when they're in the timber. And the other thing, and you're not doing as much damage either. I mean, whenever you're going in rain or or right after the rain there, it's kind of like hunting. I mean, typically if it was hunting, I'd like to go before, because it generally washes away a lot of that sense. But you can walk silently through the woods. You're just not disturbing as much stuff. So it's a good way to kind of sniper in there and find a lot of horns, because they will shine whenever you get that rain.
Yeah.
Some of the best shed days I've ever had in my life were on just rainy, nasty days, where I had to go out in all my rain gear, and go out and try to find it. But they were amazing days. They really were.
Sunshine is tough. If it's really, really, really bright, man, I can't even tell you how many sheds I've walked past. And usually if it's sunny, I'll always be walking in one direction. One direction you're walking into the sun, you just can't see anything. So you have to stop, turn around like constantly in order to kind of get a view. But I've walked within feet. I had Eric Dickerson's on my GoPro. I walked literally 5 feet from it. Walked one direction, didn't even see it. It blended right in a bright sunny day. Turned around and it stuck out like a beacon. But if you can, like when I'm lucky because I live here. Tyler kind of has to travel and stuff for shed hunting, but I'll pick the days that are cloudy, and it does make a huge difference in your ability to see them. But one other tip I'm going to give you guys. I started, and actually the guy who kind of turned me onto it was Andy Nevar, but I started wearing safety glasses last year when I was shed hunting. I finally scratched my eye one too many times and was just like, all right, as stupid as it looks, and maybe it's not comfortable to wear them, but I'm going to start wearing safety glasses. And I actually enjoy it so much more now shed hunting, especially if I'm out on a field edge and I'm not walking anywhere in the timber. I just put them up on my hat or whatever. But when I'm in the timber, man, it makes it more enjoyable because you don't realize how much you had to strain your eyes, like, kind of close them when you're going through thick brush. Now I actually enjoy shed hunting more, and it kind of saves your eyes a bit, just your muscles, from constantly wincing and trying to avoid getting a stick in the eye. So that's one thing I started 100%. Doing, and I love it.
100%. I mean, I this. I mean, I was helping one of my hunting buddies trim out a tree stand here a few years ago, and tree limb whipped back and whipped me in the eye, and it cut my cornea. And I can tell you, to this day, it still bothers me, and it was the most painful thing that I've practically gone through when you cut your eyeball and you don't realize how much you use your eye. And it's like, even though you try closing that side, it's like every time you move your other eye, it would flare up. So, I'm 100% on my side. I do the same thing now. It's definitely, it definitely does make it more enjoyable, so long as people aren't out there making fun of the way you look. But but you know what? Who cares? As long as you're out there having fun.
Yep.
So, do you guys think
the other thing that go ahead.
Do you guys think that trail cameras, play a bit of a role in your success and or failure, just because you're able to monitor monitor the amount of deer that are in a specific area, just like so essentially, I guess you're utilizing them just like you would during deer season, during the hunting season.
Well, first off, if I have something that's like really, really big, I'm using that trail camera really just to find out if he's dropping. And quite honestly, I'm probably going to end up going, and maybe pushing out other deer that I'm not as worried about. But if I had something really big, I'm probably going to go ambush sheds. That's the first and foremost where a lot of times where I'm running the trail cameras to find out when a really big one has dropped, and then I'll go after those, because you know how it is. I mean, if you give it, sometimes you give those things, 2 weeks, and you might have, half of a G2 there because dang squirrel got to it, So a lot of times I'll go after them. But yeah, I mean, I'll use it in the same sense where I'm just watching to see a good majority, of those horns, that are down, and like I said, to start it off, I like to feed the deer a lot of times just to help them get through winters like this and not keep the stress on them. I do think that winter stress does affect, I truly believe that it does affect their horn growth, into the next year. So I do think it is a good thing to help them get through, if they can have less stress.
And not only that, but excuse me, I got a little thing in my throat, but not only that, but you're helping the overall herd health, meaning all your does are eating the same food. So that means going into spring when, they're pregnant right now. So basically, if you can keep them fed well, that just means they're going to give birth to a healthier, bigger baby, little fawn. And that fawn will most likely have a better chance of survival, most likely have a better chance of being healthy, and eventually growing a rack if it's a buck. So it's not just the bucks that benefit from it. You're certainly feeding the does and the younger deer as well. And I'll tell you, healthy, fat deer grow big racks.
Yeah. I mean, when they don't have to, when it can go, when their bodies are obviously filled, and then they can put it into the racks after that. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, and the social stress, or the not even social, but just the winter stress, that we can have. I mean, we've had some cold days here in the Midwest. I mean, lots of negatives, especially in late December, early January. I mean, that's hard on those deer. That's really hard on them. So anything, that I can do in order to, ensure that they're at least getting through the winter a little bit, I'm always happy to do. The benefit, of course, during these types of winters is that the sheds do end up being more concentrated, which can make it really fun when you go in and you find, 5-10 sheds. And like I said, I mean, I'm going to end up sticking with those cherry picking spots to start with, those southeast facing slopes, south side grass slopes, and starting with that.
Hey, I got a tip too. Another tip. All right. Break up your shed hunts. If you spend 8 hours shed hunting in the timber, it will drive you insane. And before you know it, you'll stop paying attention and you'll lose your focus. One of my secrets is I love to break up my shed hunts just to keep your eyes fresh. Meaning I'll do some field edge stuff, then I'll go into some thicker timber, then I'll try to get in a little bit more wide open timber, and then I'll also try to do like more food plot, or like if you got cut corn or beans or something like that. If you try to do just timber all day, you'll end up missing sheds just because you can't focus and your eyes just start to blind, over a period of time. They just blur out. Before you know it, you're like, crap, did I even look over there, when you're walking. So shed tip.
Yep. No, and I'll give another one here as well. We'll call this just a tip, but just kidding. Another thing I'll do is actually bring a shed with me sometimes, like a small shed, and I'll just walk them, especially when I'm just starting off, because the hardest thing that will end up happening when you start off into the woods is your eyes just aren't trained to see them, especially on those sunny days. And so I'll bring a small shed a lot of times with me and just throw that ahead of me, and just kind of turn my head and then try finding that thing. It just focuses your eyes that much more than you're looking for a little bit of a time, maybe a beam, and it gets your eyes trained quickly there, rather than sometimes if you go walking in the woods there and your eyes aren't trained quite yet for it, your eyeballs you just miss things. It's maybe a stick instead of that tine that's barely sticking up, or a main beam, right there. So it's not easy. It's really not. So that's why I think that having a shed to bring along with you and just throwing that ahead of you every now and then, just to train the eyes, can really help you, focus those eyeballs down a little bit.
Todd, did we lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I have so many shed tips. I just don't want to blow our listeners' minds this early in the podcast.
Okay. Well, yeah, we don't want to blow any minds.
Jason, do you have any other questions specifically?
I thought you were going to ask me if I had any shed tips. I was going to say yes, I do. Find out what I did and don't do that. I guess the interesting thing that Tyler just said, and he was talking about, where your eyes are focusing, things of that nature. That's something that really is a learned habit, is it not? I mean, if you've gone out in the timber like I have here in Wisconsin, deer just don't winter on the property that I've hunted in the past. They just don't winter there. So if I'm lucky enough to stumble into a few sheds here and there, that's a bonus. But does some of that just come? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, there's no way you can really train yourself for that, short of just having the experience. Is there, guys?
I think that, a couple of extra, little tidbits is when you're looking for these sheds, you have to be aware of the areas you're walking through. If I'm happen to be walking through, timber that's maybe a little bit thicker, I'm probably going to focus more straight down in front of me. with every now and then glancing up and trying to see if I can pick off, something that's a little bit further. Typically whenever, I'm trying to grid out a spot and anything like that, I'm trying to keep it where, walking within, 20 yards of where I did last time.
Yeah, dude, you hit the nail on the head, man. I'm telling you, over the years, Tyler and I have shed hunted together, and we've also shed hunted in big groups. And I've watched guys go 150 miles an hour through a timber, and I'm kind of a picker. I enjoy, certainly in spots where it's a little bit more wide open and there's not that much deer sign, I'll move a little bit quicker through. But I'm like, my personality, I just like to cover things really, really well. And I think a lot of guys try to look too far. I always tell myself over and over and over when I'm shed hunting, look small or look short. And I literally imagine a 10-yard radius around me. And I look from side to side and I walk slowly covering that area. And then I'll turn, especially I like to use ridges. If you've got ridges, you can kind of control or remember where you've walked just based on the size of the ridges. And Jason, you walked with me here last year, and our topography is kind of cool around here because it's a little bit smaller. So like, let's say a ridge is 100 yards long by like 56 yards wide. I like to walk on the top edge, kind of like a third of the way down, because that's generally where the deer are. But the other reason is then you can kind of look down in the bottom, and then you cover that side of the hill, and then I like to turn around and come literally right down the center of that ridge. And I do that back and forth depending on the ridge size. And I've shed hunted with guys over the years that like they were already 2 miles away, and I'm picking shed after shed off these ridges because I just take my time and I'm anal. Like, and especially if you're shed hunting in an area that you hunt, slow down, take the time to look at the sign. And kind of the way I've trained myself to enjoy shed hunting more is I consider it, I'm taking a walk and I'm learning, and it's a scouting trip. And if I fed shed antlers along the way, then that's just a bonus. And that way you're just not disappointed, because I think it happens so often where guys go out and they don't find anything and they get disappointed. Well, I'm in the wrong area, so they lose focus and they just give up. And dude, I'm telling you, and Tyler can tell you the same thing. You take a lot more walks where you don't find anything than when you do. Don't let it discourage you. Just, if anything, it kind of motivates me, because I'm like, all right, there's no sheds here, then they got to be someplace else. And that, you just got to keep on grinding. And that's how it is, man. Some of the best shed days I've ever had, I found all my sheds like in the last 10 minutes on the way back to the vehicle or on the way back to my wheeler or something, where it's just like random, but you walk and walk and walk and walk and don't find anything. And then all of a sudden, boom, you hit that pocket. So you can't get discouraged. I think a lot of guys go out shed hunt once or twice. They don't find anything. Oh, there's no deer around here. Well, that's not the right attitude if you're going to find a lot of sheds.
Well, let's break this down for just a second here, so we can keep some semblance of order. So, what if I'm understanding both of you correctly? You're feeding the deer, if that's legal, just to keep tabs on them. That's the start. It's not a necessity, but that's certainly gives you a leg up in this situation. Then you're pretty sure of, or you have a relative amount of certainty of where those deer are going to be. So you're then setting out to, comb those particular areas, or likely where they're bedding, etc. Right? Am I following?
Rather than even feeding deer or whatever, I mean, really, it's just wherever the food is. I mean, that's, we have the luxury of being able to do it here in Iowa. But, where, guys maybe in Wisconsin or Illinois or wherever it is, they can do that. There's food literally everywhere. And it just depends on where that actual food is. I mean, in winters like this, where you have snow, you can see where they're feeding, right? So if you can't go and put a corn pile like that there to try to concentrate them down a little bit, you can go out and if anything, just go hit your field edges. Go take the four-wheeler, go hit the field edges, find out where these deer are really starting to winter. And that'll narrow things down, I think, for you, rather than just, rather than just saying, hey, go find the food. But you can find out where they're feeding, during times like this, when the snow is all the evidence in the world for you, right now.
Literally, I took a ride yesterday, came up to an area where my corn is, and I'm looking through this timber, and I'm like, what in the heck? Looked like a herd of cattle running at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday. All these deer are out there. So while I'm taking my little wheeler trip around, I'm looking in the snow where all the main runs are, how they follow the terrain. I'm learning something all the time, but just like what Tyler mentioned, all I'm doing is scouting for shed hunting. Now I know where the deer are, where they're coming from, and so those are the areas I'm going to go right back to when it's time, and I'm going to pound them, and I'm going to spend time in those areas where the most deer density. And basically all the food does is it concentrates them. It does the same thing it does during hunting season when you're hunting the does essentially during the rut. You're just concentrating the does, which make it easier to find the buck. So food works in the same exact way. But another shed tip, okay? This time of year is my favorite time of year to access new properties. I know all my neighbors around here have the situation. But years ago, when I was constantly looking for the next deer to hunt, the next piece of property to hunt, this is the time of year where you can go talk to farmers, and it's a much easier process of getting permission to look for shed antlers than it is to look for to get permission to hunt. So I always use this time of year to get to know landowners, talk with them. And one other big shed tip is if you are talking to landowners about looking for shed antlers, don't mention the word hunting. If you say, I want to go shed hunting, some of these people just associate, well, it's not deer season. You're not allowed to be out hunting. I always ask to look for deer antlers or shed antlers. Don't mention the word hunting in it, because I've had farmers look at me over the years, especially women, nothing against women, but like these old farm ladies, you're talking with them and you mention shed hunting and they don't know what shed hunting is. So they hear hunting and they're assuming like, you're going in the woods and poaching these deer, in the middle of spring or whatever. So that's my big tip is talk to landowners. This is the time you can scout. And, a lot of the pieces of property that you'll get permission to hunt, they also let other people hunt. So you'll be able to see where the tree stands are from the previous season. You can tell if there's been humans in there, and most certainly you can tell if the deer are in there. And that's a big thing. For me, it always worked really well because that establishes a relationship with that landowner in the spring when other people most likely aren't asking to hunt or look for shed antlers, and you can kind of stand out, so to speak. And then you got the whole summer to build a relationship before you even ask permission to hunt, really. And a lot of times it's just a way of narrowing down your options so that, if you walk a piece of property, I used to get permission to hunt a lot of pasture ground and shed hunt a lot of pasture ground. And a lot of the pieces you get into, and you can just tell this isn't where I'm going to kill a big buck. So then you don't even have to worry about looking into it or scouting, come fall. So it just narrows down, your good properties versus properties you just don't want to waste time on.
And just to, further, on what Todd's getting at, this, in my opinion, right now is when deer hunting season actually begins. Right now, as you're getting out there shed hunting, this is the time to scout. All the evidence from last season, which is going to tell you exactly what these deer are going to do this upcoming season, is all there. The secret, for these guys who go out there and they kill, big deer year after year is they use this time of year to gather as much evidence as they possibly can, because during the season, we're not going and walking through the timbers. We're not doing any of that type of stuff. I mean, you're just going to run the deer out then, right? This is the time of year you can go walk through the timbers. You can pick out the exact tree, that you want to hunt, that you feel like you can kill that buck. You can go and figure out, maybe you use it a time like this where there's snow on the ground here, like there is in the Midwest, to go find that single, big buck spot that's cut out in the snow, that's, on top of a little ridge that's overlooking the entire bottom. It's like, well, that's probably a mature buck, right there. You got a pretty good idea that at least one's wanting to bed in this particular spot. Well, maybe there's a tree right here for this northwest wind. Maybe I can, come along this creek, and you can start designing your entire season right now, rather than come, September or October, and you're like, well, maybe I should be here based upon what this deer is doing. Well, those deer are going to do very, very similar things every single year, and so, and like I said, all the evidence is in the woods right now, and this
Tyler,
is the time.
I'd straight up call that a shed tip.
Oh my goodness! Hey, I know we're.
By the way, I was laying in bed last night with my wife, and
here we go. Oh no, this is where it all
I kept
goes
saying
bad.
over and over, I'm like, shed show. And she's like, would you shut up? I was so excited about talking about shed hunting because I haven't been out shed hunting that much. So shed show. But the other part too is for any public land hunters, guys who do a lot of portable hunting, run and gun hunting, I still run and gun hunt, and I literally save areas as my backup plan. And this is the time of year, just like what Tyler was saying. I mean, you've heard Brad Kuhn at our show talking about the same thing, your spring scouting. So these are sections, or these are times of year where I get into my thick, nasty, awesome bedding areas. And possibly for the only time of the season, this is the time you get a chance to take a snapshot and see what's going on in there. Not that you're going to go bust right in there and try to hunt, but that's where you pick up all your information on, okay, look at all this big buck sign in this concentrated area. Well, it's clear that a big buck is calling this home during the rut. That's where I want to focus, come season. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go in there in the summer or in the early fall and just put up a tree stand. A lot of times I like to hunt from the outside end. So I'll have my stationary stands, my stands that are going to be set up in advance. And sometimes they're in the thick stuff, but a lot of times I'll leave those areas alone. And then as the season progresses, if I haven't killed the buck that I'm after, then I'll kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit more, and that's when I'll do some sneak ins where I'll do a run and gun. And I like some areas, I like to do that run and gun as opposed to having something set up, because if you go in there and trim a bunch of stuff early on, it just changes it. It seems like more I've learned over the years. Tyler and I used to trim a lot of tree stands together, and we drill holes, we called them, giant shooting lanes through a lot of that stuff. And I've noticed on certain properties it doesn't affect it at all, but around here, if I go into a thick area like that, I would call like a bedding area, and I cut huge lanes, it usually takes 2 or 3 years before the deer kind of get used to it, and you can really catch a big buck moving through there. And so that's kind of part of my secret is some of the scouting I do right now, I'm literally thinking about how I'm going to run and gun, how I'm going to access that area come fall if I have to. You obviously want to leave all your sanctuary areas alone, but that's where I will get aggressive if I have to. I mean, if you come middle of November and you haven't killed the buck yet, that's when I kind of throw a little bit more caution to the wind, and I'm far more aggressive, I think, than a lot of guys. But again, man, spring scouting, it is where it is at.
Right.
Well, and I'll even give a more specific example that the buck that I killed, this year, as you guys, that I killed a big 10-pointer I called Chief. So last year I found his shed probably about 150, maybe 200 yards from where I ended up killing him this year. But during shed season last year, I specifically went and looked in this spot. I'm like, okay, why is this deer, possibly over here? And I knew that he had liked that area, especially earlier in the season. And so I went and scouted out, and there's this, nice little hill that basically overlooked a funnel. And there was areas where it was just shredded. I could see there was giant community scrapes right down at the very bottom of this, where this funnel was coming through. And it just said to me, okay, I'm about guaranteed there's a mature buck that's bedding very, very close. And essentially how I ended up killing him was I put a tree stand on the north, on the north side of this draw that was, I'd say draw, but a little thicker where he was, but straight east of it kind of narrowed down a little bit. And so I put a tree stand on the north side of it, and I put a tree stand on the south side of it. It was easy in, easy out, access for both of them. And I would not have killed that deer, if I hadn't known, going through shed season and walking through that specific spot and looking at that area and saying, okay, there is a mature buck that is definitely bedding here. And I went and set 2 tree stands up, so I kind of north and a south wind for each one of them. And I ended up killing him on a southeast wind on October 19th last year. Because he was bedding within 50 yards of where my tree stand was, where I found during shed season. So that's where the shed season is just such a powerful time to go and plan for the next year, because then you can get your tree stands in specific spots. You can set them up to get in and out of easily, and it's just it's a no-brainer, to get out there and educate yourself during this time of year if you want to kill a certain big mature buck this upcoming season.
Well, I have a brand new piece that I'm going to be hunting this year here in Wisconsin that I just picked up in the last 2 weeks. And one of the things that I'm going to do essentially is grid search it. And the way I'm going to accomplish that is what actually Todd and I talked about last week. and I don't know where everything's going to air and whether people will hear it before this show or after the show or whatever the case, but Onyx Maps has a feature on it that we talked about last week where you can essentially track where you've been and look at it on a big screen, so to speak. And this property is all new. It's a total of 400 acres, 200 and some, or about 200 is what I have leased, and I'm just going to start to grid search it for all the things that you guys talked about. So I guess the one tip that I would give that is I think going to be really useful is that it's good to know where you've been, which is what Todd and I talked about last week, just by being able to look at it from a 50,000-foot view.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially when you're going on to a new property. New properties, they're exciting. You just don't know what you're going to get into. They're always fun. I love getting on new properties. It's one of my favorite things. To get on there and try to. It's so exciting.
I can't wait to walk it. I've ridden through it and I haven't gotten too far off of an UTV yet. Now we've got a bunch of snow, so I'll probably wait a little bit. But I'm dying to get a Spartan camera over there, just because I think there's probably some deer carrying yet, and it would give me a good idea of what's going to be in store for the year to come.
I have a question for Tyler.
Shoot.
I've been watching from the house. I'm very fortunate. I have the coolest setup for looking at deer with snow on the ground. I can literally, with my Vortex scope, I have a spotting scope set up on a tripod right up my upstairs room, and I can watch deer from like 1,500 yards from my house. And the other day I'm watching two different batcher groups, two different complete areas. One's about, 1,000 yards away. The other was probably 1,200, 1,500 yards away. And I watched a group of like 7 or 8 bucks, and from what I could gather, they were all still carrying. From what I could gather, there were 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and I could tell 1 or 2 of them had a big body, but I couldn't tell exactly, at that distance. In the timber, it's kind of hard to tell, but generally speaking, like when it gets really cold like this, you definitely see more bucks kind of start bachelor grouping up, so to speak. Tyler, do you think, will the dominant bucks also hang out with those in those groups? Just, is it weather dependent, or generally are dominant bucks going to always be alone no matter what?
No, this time of year, I mean, they will be over in the same areas with them, just because the food is driving them to those spots, right?
Sure.
But there is definitely a social hierarchy when it comes to these deer. I mean, just off of just watching like these Spartan cameras here this year, you can see, just through trail cameras, when a big, there's a 7-year-old deer that I call Rosie O'Donnell, that's there, and he's just a fat old thing. And,
that's awesomely politically incorrect.
Yeah. So anyways, he shows up on the corn pile, and literally like everything just moves off of it, and then you notice that, your 2-year-olds will feed with some 3-year-olds, your 3-year-olds, sometimes with your 4-year-olds. Sometimes you'll see that, that 7-year-old with like a 1-year-old, because there's really not any, it's not like 2 tough guys that are necessarily going to go up. It's like, okay, here, what are you going to really do to me? Okay, you can feed here. And that's kind of, so there's a social hierarchy, that definitely goes through everywhere that they're at. So they will for sure be together. I mean, there's no specific, thing that necessarily happens. Everything's I'm talking in generalities, here, because there's always an exception to the rule. But the food is going to dictate, what deer are going to be there. If that's the only food in town, the big boy's going to be there with the young guys. And that's just the way it's going to end up being. If there's different areas, they can go feed, they might do that. But the other thing is they like, deer like other deer, a lot of times, if they're maybe in a spot that's maybe even a little more vulnerable, because other deer let them know what's going on. In my opinion, you watch, we did a lot of deer drives growing up in Iowa, RLIs, and it seemed like the really big deer that was always in the back, whenever they'd end up coming through. And in my opinion, it was always just because, well, I'll let these other idiots go first here, and in my opinion, these old bucks, well, we'll let the younger ones kind of see what's going on there and tell me, how to react. So I do think that it's a little bit of security for them, as well.
I got another shed tip.
We have time for one more, and then we've got to let Tyler go because he's got to do something far more important than what we're talking about.
Well, it is what it is. This is the shed show, so everything else stops. One of the things that I repeat to myself over and over when I'm shed hunting, especially when I start getting tired and you're just starting to get a little lazier, is I always say over and over in my head, ends of the earth, to the ends of the earth. And I can't tell you how many times I have found shed antlers in weird spots where, if you're on a main trail and, like, let's say the ridge goes over and there's a ravine, I will walk the extra 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet to look down that ravine or to look in a little thicket. Sometimes you get a little lazy and you start just taking the path of least resistance. And I'll tell you, a lot of other hunters do the same thing, shed hunters. So imagine if you're out shed hunting on public land, a lot of times the spots that you're going to find sheds are going to be the spots that no one else has looked. And sometimes those are the ends of the earth spots where sometimes you got to go walk 10 yards down to look in a little spot and then walk on the same trail back. But you got to do it. So I do that over and over. I say ends of the earth, and I'll make myself, even if I have to cross a fence to not on a property I don't have, but if there's a little thicket and there's a barbed wire fence, I'm going to go over that barbed wire fence to look in that thicket, even if I have to come right back and jump back over the fence. That's one of my things. I found shed antlers over the years in some of the goofiest spots. And I know Tyler has too, because it seems for more reasons than one, but one of them is just because that's a spot no other humans looked that year, whether you're hunting on public land or other guys have gone through. But it's also, deer are goofy, man. And a lot of times that's where those big ones are, in those stupid, weird spots.
So walking on that 2-track is a bad idea?
Oh, no, but here's a perfect idea. I mean, I got a long out in the sanctuary. Tyler's been out there. Jason, you've been out there with me. And I have a logging road that I converted into a food plot, which is basically just a clover plot, like basically it's 20 feet wide, and it goes all the way around through my sanctuary. And it's real nice and easy to drive my ATV on there. But along the creek, there's like a 20-yard buffer of just the nastiest, thickest brush. So as I'm on that main clover patch, I will get on my hands and knees and take those little trails to the creek edge so that I can look down in the creek, see if there's an antler laying down in there along the bank or on the steep edge of the bank. And a lot of times they're there in back walks. So literally you walk down a trail, it's so thick, and you look, and then you have to walk right back on that trail. And dude, I found so many sheds just on those steep, weird banks, because that's where the deer are jostling most, coming up and down out of those creeks. That's when their heads are moving around. Their racks will hit brush. So I mean, Tyler, same thing. I remember you finding that side of Canadian bacon, and it is the most massive, giant 4-side antler ever. And you found it in like almost impassable thick brush, did you not?
I did, and it's still that shed. Even though I found that one, which is probably my favorite shed to this day that I found, it was like an 80-inch 4-point side, and it was giant, 29-inch main beam on it. You'd think you'd be able to see that thing from a mile away, but it was in the thickest, nastiest stuff that I had to crawl through. And the part that drives me crazy is they found the opposite side to that deer the next spring or next March or whatever it was. And it probably wasn't more than 10 yards from where I found the other one.
It was really that close?
And it was that close. And so the other side ended up being a 5-point side, not quite as tall time, but scoring, I think, maybe an inch, bigger than that. But just a giant 9-point deer, 29-inch main beams on each side, and huge deer. So it was within 10 yards. And if you'd seen me that day when I found the first one there, I was like a bloodhound there. I was going as hard and fast as I could through this entire timber, trying to cover as much as I could. And the dang thing was 10 yards from where I found the other one. And it was just so thick in there. And it was a sunny day, that day where, it was probably, just a different angle where I didn't see it. So you win some, you lose some. But I do have to get moving here, guys. So I hate to cut you off short here, but I got to go save lives here in the OR right now.
Right. Well, hey, we'll consider this part 1 of many. Or
Shed show.
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna have Todd sing a jingle for an
Well, we'll continue this conversation. We got some cool announcements coming up too. So, Tyler, thank you very much for your insight. I always enjoy talking with Tyler. He's one of my best buddies and one of the best whitetail hunters you will ever meet. So, thanks again, brother, and good luck in your surgery.
Thanks. Happy to help, and you know me, I always love to talk deer, so not a problem at all.
Well, there you have it, folks. Episode number 1 of 1. We definitely intended to have Tyler on more than once, but, well, I guess as things happened, Bentley Coben made himself available. That took up another shed show, and we're just running out of time this year. So we've had so many folks either ask to come on the podcast or agree to come on the podcast. We're having time fitting everyone in. So Tyler's definitely a wealth of knowledge. If you don't follow him on any of his social media pages, you should do so. He's a guy that's got a ton of knowledge, and he'll also have some exciting things coming up here in the future for us to talk about with him, in addition to shed hunting and deer hunting in general. So with that, I will close out the show today. I want to remind everyone that we have a special deal going on with Ozonics. You can purchase a HR, that's the new HR 230, and get a free dry wash bag using the code WKP18, or you can get a HR 300 and a dry wash bag for free. That's dry wash bag, again, is $199 value. You can use the coupon code WKP18. If you don't want to do that, just go to www.ozonicshunting.com/WKP. From there, you'll be able to get the same deal and order it just as simple as you were to use the coupon code. So if anybody has any questions about that, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to clear any of those questions up. Thanks again for all your support. Thanks to Ozonics for their support. For any of you who have ideas or questions about a show, don't hesitate to email Todd or myself. Todd is todd@whiteknuckleproductions.com, and I am Jason at whiteknuckleproductions.com. For those of you who don't know how to download a podcast, I'll go through this one more thing. If you're an iPhone, iPad, whatever listener, grab your phone or device, go to the iTunes store and search for the White Knuckle Podcast. This will help you to download the free podcast app that's produced by Apple, and then you can subscribe to the show from within that app. Every time I produce a new episode, it'll get downloaded right to your device. For Android listeners, download the Stitcher Radio app, which is also free. Search for White Knuckle Podcasts again, and you'll get that podcast downloaded directly to your device as well. We also need your reviews, either on Stitcher or on iTunes. I think that's it. If I forgot anything, I'll get it next week. Thanks again for listening. Make it a great day. Jason out.